Mitsubishi needs to have a serious chat with its dudes in R&D back in Japan, because I believe it's made some decisions which are inadvertently poisoning the product and making it seriously unattractive to otherwise enthusiastic owners. Details next. Rather than just take my word for this and hear me pontificate over and over about this and that, why don't we hear from one of you who reached out to me by email in the past couple of days, a dude named Glenn, and this is directly what he sent Mitsubishi Motors Australia Limited via their online contact portal. And I suggest this is a really valuable thing that you should make use of, not just Mitsubishi's, but if you're a Toyota customer or a Mazda customer, whatever, and you've got feedback for them, let them know, because individually, people can be crackpots or not, or off the pace or not, or make irrelevant criticisms or not. But in the aggregate, if a car maker gets hundreds of criticisms that are all broadly in line, they would be mugs not to act and at least raise it with R&D. So full points to Glenn here for actually reaching out to Mitsubishi directly rather than just have some bleat on Facebook or something. He sent this to me as an FYI. Here's what he says. Hi Mitsubishi, new Triton owner here. I have to ask, who in your team road tested the driver monitoring system and approved it for production? What a joke. It constantly tells me I'm asleep, including at 7 a.m., 10 minutes into my commute to work. I hate it, he says. It's annoying, distracting, and dangerous. Why don't you give us the option to buy a 4-star ANCAP rated vehicle with no driver monitoring? That's kind of, let's say, unambiguous, isn't it? And I suspect Glenn is not alone. In fact, I'm with Glenn on this, and we'll get into that in just a sec. But here's what Mitsubishi responded with. Mal, Mitsubishi Motors Australia Limited, said, we acknowledge receipt of your recent feedback and apologise for the delay in response. Naturally, we're concerned to read of your dissatisfaction with the driver monitoring system feature. Please note that your comments have been noted and are respected. We would like to thank you for taking the time to provide us with this greatly appreciated feedback. Please be assured that we at MAL always encourage and appreciate any comments from our customers and the public alike. Please be advised that your comments have been forwarded to the appropriate department for their information. MAL trust the above is of assistance. I actually really like the senior executive management team at Mitsubishi in Australia. I think they're pretty sincere and honourable people, and they are committed to trying to do the best job they can in the circumstances. They've also been handed a bit of a shit sandwich recently, once from the federal government with a change in the ADR regulations that meant they had to take a few of their more ageing lineup off sale temporarily until new models could be released. So no car maker enjoys doing that. And also their boss here in Australia, Sean Westcott, departed pretty unexpectedly, I'd have to say. And I don't know what that says because I don't know what the details are there. But anyway, this kind of adds to their load, and that's not my intention. It's really something that I think is in the public interest, because their R&D centre, it seems to me, is hurting the product. And I want to focus on that for the rest of this report. This is the Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, and it will allow you to evolve faster than actual evolution. You'll get a serious upgrade in minutes. People will talk. It's perfect for a date or a job interview, and Christmas is just around the corner too. They call this one the White Hot Edition. No idea why. If you can figure that out, let me know in the comments. But it is easy to find, even in the darkest gym bag. The really clever thing about it, though, is these interchangeable blade heads. You get the foil blade and the standard trimmer blade. So essentially, it's like having two trimmers for the price of one kind of thing. Roughing in and designer stubble, if that's the way you roll, with the standard trimmer blade, and then the foil blade for literally polishing things off. It looks pretty spesh too, if you ask me. Like, it's not as if you'll have to find some dingy bottom drawer to hide it in, and out there on the shelf it could be a real conversation starter. And the skin-safe technology too, it rocks. I've been using Manscaped trimmers like forever, and the skin-safe thing is not a joke. It is really hard to nick or cut yourself with these blades. I suppose if you're a complete moron you could do it, but the risk is quite low. And you know that feeling, that sinking feeling, when you do a U-turn in a confined, unfamiliar space and you ding the wheel on the curb? You don't feel that with these. At least that's my experience. It's really easy to use too. You just grab it and evolve. In the shower, you can use it wet or dry. Manscaped makes intimate grooming simple and streamlined, and also way less terrifying than that veritable Temu chainsaw you may have been getting by with for this purpose to date. Evolve today, dude, because this thing is at the opposite end of the intimate grooming spectrum. Go to manscaped.com/AutoExpert today and use my promo code AutoExpert to get 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off with promo code AutoExpert at manscaped.com/AutoExpert. Just for complete disambiguation, I only just stopped test driving a couple of brand new Mitsubishis. I had an Outlander Exceed for a week, and then I followed it with Triton GLX dual cab chassis with an aluminium tray. And I'd say one thing up front, which might be hard for you to swallow or not, and that is that car makers really don't get paid the big bucks to make successive model range iterations any worse. They hate that. In fact, they bust their humps to make the next product better. They try to give it more power, better economy, more space, more options, the latest features, etc., etc. And there's often a series of constraints in play that we can't see out here, such as bean counter constraints and other constraints that are not publicly ever listed, like functional space constraints and, cooling capacity constraints and transmission torque capacity constraints. All kinds of things constrain what they can do. And this is why no car maker ever manages to produce the ideal car, no matter how much we car perverts out here really want them to. But on the subject of Outlander, for example, I'd say this is the most cohesive Outlander ever. They've done a series of facelift type midlife model upgrades, and the sum total of all of those is pretty positive, I have to say. The new infotainment system, which is some Yamaha premium thing, it's really good, connects wirelessly. I found first-time connection really simple and seamless, and every subsequent connection when you just jump in with your phone, perfect, okay? It's a pretty comfortable car, and it's a nice cohesive design. It's got good dynamics. They've spent a bit of time upgrading the steering and the suspension there, so 2 thumbs up, dudes, on all of that. Some cosmetic improvements as well. One change that they did make to Exceed is that they removed the 7 seats, and it's a 5-seat only now, I think. And I guess that's a swings and roundabouts thing, because I always thought Outlander was pretty good as a really compact 7-seat SUV, which is just right for families who perhaps have 5 bums on seats regularly, and little Jimmy or someone sometimes has a friend along, or 2 friends, whatever, or sometimes your aging parents have to ride with you, and that means 2 of the kids have to go in the back, but that's kind of infrequent. And Outlander, to me, seemed to hit the sweet spot for SUVs there, because you didn't have to step up to the full-blown 7-seat tank. You could have something that was more compact, more in line with the dimensions and weight of a 5-seater, but with occasional 7-seat functionality thrown in. And I guess that's gone away with the Exceed. That's a decision they've made, which is perhaps defensible if you say, well, I guess there's a bunch of people out there who only ever use the 5 seats, and they would embrace the extra luggage space that exists by virtue of not having to fold the seats 6 and 7 flat into the cargo bay kind of thing, okay? So that's a personal preference thing. It will turn some people away and it might attract others. I don't care about that. Now, moving on to the Triton, I think they've also done a magnificent job with 95% of the Triton. They've made it better, and I'm an owner of a previous generation Triton. I'm reasonably happy with it, but the new one is much more comfortable. The interior is also more cohesive. It just fits together better. The transmission selector is better. The dashboard is better. It's all better. You know, the engine is better because of the addition of the bi-turbo induction. Just makes it deliver better. The transmission's great. It's still got all-wheel drive mode for a high traction surface, which is something you really only get in a Tasman or a V6 Ranger at considerably higher price. So for all these reasons, 2 thumbs up on the new Triton as well. It is a significant step forward, so job done. But then I think about Glenn Baby's comments relating to the driver monitoring system, and I concur in both cars. And it goes deeper than that. It really does affect the whole ADAS suite, like the driver assistance systems of electronic quote-unquote assistance are poorly implemented. And I have a theory about that. The theory, hypothesis really, is that car makers are busting their hump over here in R&D to make all of those things that I just laid out better. And usually they do that very successfully because there's clear consumer demand for those things, right? We want more performance, better efficiency, more space, more aesthetically pleasing vehicle, whatever. And we can all point to times when they got that wrong. But in the aggregate, overwhelmingly, they get it right with every new model. And they've done so. Mitsubishi has done this. So this is not a takedown. This is like I'm gagging for it. I'm begging you to pay attention in R&D and fix something that could be so easily unfucked with better calibration. At least that's how it seems to me, okay? So I want to lay that out. On the driver monitoring system, I was quite hopeful that this latest generation of their ADAS would be better, because I did test drive several months ago the new Triton shortly after it was launched, and the driver monitoring system did my freaking head in because it kept telling me that it couldn't detect my face. And I know that they subsequently issued a press release that basically said, yeah, we've had a lot of complaint about that from owners and we've done a recalibration. So this was my opportunity to retest that vehicle and hope that it was better. And you know what? It was a little bit better, but it was only a bee's endophallus better. On both of those vehicles, presumably running the same generation of ADAS, I got the same warnings over and over, warning me to the effect that I was distracted when I was really just trying to read something on the dashboard. You know, your head goes down like this, you're trying to read something on the dashboard, you take your eyes off whatever briefly, just to clarify the speed zone that you're in or anything like that. You look down like that and all of a sudden you get an inattention warning when actually the reverse is true. And the galling thing about that is that it takes you longer to understand the warning than it would have done just to complete the task that you were completing, clarification of something, and get your eyes back on the road. So not only is it a false alarm, it's also distracting you for longer. Right? And that is completely unacceptable. The engineer in me, the lingering latent engineer in me rebels against that because that is a piece of shit design that I hate. Okay. And the other thing that happens is still that the system tells me that it can no longer detect my face. And I keep reaching up and going, well, I'm pretty sure it's still here. Mother leather. So that seems to be something that a driver doesn't need to know. Do I need to know? Does it help my ability to control the car as it moves through time and space to know that the driver monitoring system is having difficulty discerning my face, which is still there in front of it? Now, I admittedly might offer that system some challenges. I mean, this is a challenging face anyway. I think you'd agree, but probably don't help the system by wearing a cap, but I always wear a cap and I do it for duos reasons, dude. The first reason is that my father has melanoma and I am a witness up close and personally to how devastating that's been to him. And I want to do everything I can to avoid exposure to needless UV radiation. So a cap. And the other thing is, working around here, you bend forward, you got no hair. It's really easy to hurt your head because hair is actually really good padding. And that's the one thing I miss about having it. Right? So a cap just stops me biffing my head on the edge of a machine or the bench or something when I bend down to pick something up. So anyway, the cap has become part of my uniform and I'm disinclined to remove it because some line of code in a car doesn't like it or has difficulty with it. I also ran an experiment, It only ever does this when I wear sunglasses, but a cap and sunglasses in a car is not a revolutionary thing to be doing. I'm not Robinson Crusoe there, dude in R&D. There's plenty of us who drive in this way. Okay, so if I were wearing my full uniform for a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan or something, fair enough. Or if I was out in my hijab and the system had difficulty distinguishing my face, totally understandable. Or I was just going to go and do a bank job and I was wearing a ski mask. Okay, understandable. So I did this mad experiment where I wear my cap and then I put on the biggest pair of sunglasses I can find, right? The system has a meltdown with that. It's false alarming all over town. Oh my fucking God, his face has disappeared. I must tell him, because Toshi in R&D has written a line of code that says driver must be made aware when we can't detect his face, kind of thing. I don't know why that code exists, but anyway, lots of false alarms with these glasses. Not so many false alarms with these glasses here because more face, I suppose. And then finally, I ran another iteration of my mad test with these glasses and I got fewer false alarms again, but it was no picnic. I still got false alarms. So this is kind of the behavior of the system, and I don't want to shit can them because they put a lot of effort into it. I'm sure it's really just a R&D thing. Like, the system to me seems imperfect, and it was in both cars. Now, I'll admit that had I been driving down the road like this, and I don't think there's any law against this, if the system had trouble with detecting a face behind an ESAB Sentinel A60, okay, dude, fair enough. Do you need to tell me that you're having trouble? Still no, but okay if you have difficulty with that. And if you can't get the biometrics in place to figure out that this is a human face, right, driving a car, then that system's not ready for deployment. It's not an example. If this can't be detected as a face, then that is not an example of, you know how people are shit scared about the rise of superhuman AI. This is not that. This is like subhuman dumb technology, because everyone else can look at any cap and combination of those glasses or even a Sentinel A60 or a Ku Klux Klan uniform headdress thingo and still figure out there's a face there, right? So the technology is imperfect and it's not helping. It really isn't. It's training you to ignore it. The other thing that happened all the time was speed limit false alarms, like speed limit detection false alarms. And I'd have to say, in the Outlander Exceed in particular, the GUI team, like the graphic user interface team designing the dashboard, have done a sensational job delineating the detected speed limit, because on the rotary dial of the speed display, when it detects a particular limit, like 80 or something, 80 lines up in red and there's a U-shaped encapsulation pointing down. So 80 is wrapped in this U-shaped red LED thing, and you know that that is the detected limit. And then this is brilliant because the needle on the speedo correlates with the position of the red bar, and you don't need to do very much interpretation. There's hardly any cognitive bandwidth in figuring out if you are above or below the detected limit. So 13 points out of a possible 10 for that. That's the best integration of that I've seen. Really well done. The only problem is it's quite a long drive to the joint where you have to swap cars from my place. Quite a long sort of freeway drive, and there's roadworks for a lot of that freeway. If you're in Sydney, I have to drive down either Pennant Hills Road or the North Connects Tunnel and then get in the M2, then the M7, then a bit of the M5 and then a few urban arterial roads to swap cars and then turn around and come back. So 1, pack a cut lunch, and 2, you've done the road test by the time you get home, kind of thing, you know? Anyway, when you're driving down the freeway, the speed detection, you go past an off-ramp, and this off-ramp usually has a lower speed limit than the prevailing limit on the freeway. And this is pretty flat terrain, so there's no real grade separation features going on in the civil engineering department. And that means that the camera often detects the exit speed limit. And then all of a sudden, like if you're in 100 limit and the off-ramp is limited to 70 or 60 or something, it'll display to you that you happen to be 30 or 40 kilometres an hour over the limit, which also trains you to ignore it, right? And that's an example of subhuman intelligence as well, if you like. Certainly not superhuman AI, is it? When the human can tell straight away that just over there, that's the exit ramp speed limit kind of thing, okay? So that's a fail. The other fail is the speed limits around schools. So here in Australia, we have these school zones and they're put around every school, arterial road schools, backstreet schools, blah, blah, blah. They've all got them. In New South Wales, school zones are 40 kilometres an hour and they run from 8 o'clock in the morning until 9:30 in the morning and then from 2:30 in the afternoon until 4 p.m. kind of thing. But the car itself just sees the 40. So it's always false alarming around school zones, which is a shit sandwich as well. And I find this utterly galling because in particular, when you drive the Exceed, a warning screen comes up on startup that says, warning, we're going to start sending your personal data back to Mitsubishi, which implies to me that the car has a SIM card, like it'd have one of those IEMI, whatever numbers that says that it's logged on to the data network the mobile network for data all the time, right? So it's sending information back and you've got no control over that. Kind of have to press OK. But it's not really utilising the information that it could otherwise access from the internet to figure out when the frickin' school zones are active. And this doesn't seem to me to be a particular challenge because a dumb human can do this in real time. You can drive into a school zone. You just need to know what the time is and you can tell whether the school zone is active. You also need to know whether it's a school holiday or not. Not that difficult, all right? Not that difficult for a line of code connected to the internet either because ChatGPT can frickin' well do it. So why can't the car use its data connection and a few lines of code to figure out whether the dates coincide with school holidays or not, and whether you're in that zone at a time that corresponds to the zone's activation. And finally, why can't it just read the school zone speed limit sign as a different kind of sign and identify it as one of those signs? That doesn't seem to me to be one of the great AI challenges of our century. It seems to be another example of technology that's just a bit premature to deploy, frankly. And the third thing that utterly shat me off, I have to say, and this is purely a calibration issue, but quite a serious one, is the autonomous emergency braking. And I had exactly the same thing happen in exactly the same situation, but at different locations in both of those cars, Outlander Exceed and the Triton GLX. They performed exactly the same, all right? So I'm driving down the left-hand lane of Pennant Hills Road in different locations, different vehicles. Same thing happens. Car in front of me turns left into a side street, which is not a remarkable occurrence, okay? The limit is 70 kilometres an hour, so we're not living life on the edge of the dynamics envelope. This should be easy to deal with for a computerised system, okay? And I'm not a type A driver with rabies. You know, I'm always driving a long way back from the car in front, 2 hands on the wheel, looking ahead, asking what if questions. I'm like a hyper vigilant dude when I drive a car, which is why I don't crash. You know, that's got something, there's a correlation there. More people should do that. Be a bit more vigilant. Drop back from the car in front, put both hands on the wheel, ask yourself some what if questions, and then you won't crash. It's not that freaking hard. Anyway, when in this situation, 70 k's an hour, car in front indicates it's clearly about to turn off. You get off the gas. You look around. I always make sure that in case I have to swerve, there's nothing next to me, if possible, right? So I'm doing all of that. I'm off the gas. I'm slowing down. Car in front slowing down. And there is a closure rate. Like I'm getting closer to the car in front, which is turning off, but it's not dangerous. And if I'd had a passenger in the passenger seat, they wouldn't be going... You know how passengers get twitchy when the safety margin, when you intentionally cut your reactionary gap for some reason. This often happens to me if someone hasn't been in the car with me before and we're driving around a racetrack or something. You know, it's a complete different experience for people, and they often get a bit twitchy because seemingly the margins are non-existent on a racetrack, even though they're really just a bit different. And I'm not a race driver. I'm just, you know, a reasonable driver of cars, you know. That anyway, it wasn't scary and there was sufficient margin. It was safe and reasonable. It ticks every box in my estimation, and yet right at the last minute, just before the car had departed into the freaking side street, the emergency braking system applies. And I'm going, that wasn't necessary. So Toshi or something in R&D has written a line of code, and it basically says that, you know, if we're getting this close, then brake. And the calibration is just wrong. It's wrong. It's badly set up. And I make a couple of points about this. The reason I think this takes place is because we've got the team over here in R&D that are trying to satisfy consumers by giving them more power, better economy, more space, more features, all of that shit, the things they've been asking for, in other words. And then we've got the safety compliance team over here, which gets a set of regulations from Euro NCAP, which also means ANCAP here in Australia, but they don't design for Australia. They design for 5-star Euro NCAP, which also means 5-star Australia. They hand a set of functional specifications for the behaviour of driver monitoring and emergency braking and speed limit detection and all of that annoying shit. And as long as the car complies with that specification, I don't believe they think at all about how it affects the owner/driver of that vehicle. I don't think they do that at all. And this is like a massive oversight. Like, how does that affect the poor schmo who's actually driving the car? This is a massive oversight. And Mitsubishi is not alone, but they need to address it. Because as you can see from Glen Baby, it's turning people away needlessly. And you might think I'm being a complete narc here, okay, and just old man shouting at the sky doesn't like new technology. I'd say bullshit, dude, because I'm quite happy to drive the latest car. I'd rather crash in the latest car than, I don't know, an XY Falcon or an HQ Holden or something, because I want to live and be uninjured after the crash, and that's how to do it. Latest technology, I'll take it every time. But one, these systems train you to ignore them. If every false alarm is really a training session to ignore the warning, which is bad in the case of speed limit compliance, and it's also bad in the case of fatigue. Because if you train yourself to ignore the fatigue warning, what about that one time in 10 years when you drive home and you actually start dozing off? You've already been trained to ignore the warning. This is such a fundamental human factors failure in R&D, right? And the other thing I'd say before you get into me in the comments about this and you think I'm a complete cock about it, because, it's got to make so much, if it saves one life, it's worthwhile. I can hear it now. The thing I'd say is technology, if it was deployed like this in any other area, in the powertrain control module, right? Like an engine control ECU or the gearbox control ECU or the stability control ECU or, heaven forbid, the crash sensor. Imagine if the crash sensor false fucking alarmed 60% of the time. You've got to be kidding. Like the crash sensor, this is an example of technology that's really well developed and integrated, because it does what to me seems like a superhuman job, like an impossible job when you consider the constraints against which it works. Like if you crash, there's a little sensor in the car and it's got to decide if the crash is severe enough. And it can't take all day. It's only got milliseconds. So there's a threshold here that's very carefully thought out. And if that threshold is exceeded, it goes from no-go to go, and it fires all the shit off, right? It'll fire off the seatbelt pretensioner, which has load limitation functionality as well, and then the airbags and all of this stuff. So you get pulled into the seat and the slack gets eliminated so that you're in the right position to interact with the airbag, and the airbag springs out just in time. Like the Grim Reaper is freaking there, dude. The window is open and he's reaching through for you, and then those features jump into action and slam the window shut. And their function is to be there at the Goldilocks time in space and time, right? Boom, just there. And they slow your interaction down with the car. Like the bits of the car that you crash into get sufficiently soft so that it extends the duration of your interaction with those features. And that prevents your internal organs from smashing into your skeleton, which is what kills you in a crash. So they're really interacting in this spooky way in milliseconds to slow down the way that the cerebrospinal fluid in your head rushes around when your brain moves forward after your cranium stops. And there are load limits on things like your aorta, for example, and the collision with your rib cage is what rips your aorta, which is what kills you in a crash often, right? Or just hitting your head on the frickin' windscreen. There's something in the way. So to me, that's a miracle of technology that's really well integrated. I can't remember hearing about an airbag that ever fucking false alarmed. So it is possible to do robust protection of human beings. I just think it'd be really good if team safety compliance in R&D, and not just at Mitsubishi, I'm looking at you, Hyundai Kia, right? In fact, all the car makers releasing new cars, getting them rated by Euro NCAP and ANCAP, they are going to be annoying like this for this reason. And the technology and the processes, the evolutionary process for this technology needs to mature as well, right? It needs to start addressing how the end user is going to interact with that and whether it's going to be viewed as a net positive or a net negative. Because I get in the car all the time with car industry insiders, and the first thing they do, right? These are people who are ambassadors for their brand. They've got the Antichrist in the car next to them, for fuck's sake. And the first thing they do on startup is they spend 30 to 60 seconds turning all of that shit off. I've had several times, I've had a young bloke on this channel, Brett Davis, who runs the Driving Enthusiast YouTube channel. Now, when he road tests a car, one of the items in his murder kit is a roll of gaffer tape. Although he doesn't use it to bind up his victims, he uses it to put across the driver monitoring camera because it's so shit. And Brett can drive, right? Like, this does my head in. This is an example of really terrible integration of technology, and it has to change. It has to change urgently. I really would appreciate it if someone at Mitsubishi Motors in Australia would just send this video to the R&D centre so that Toshi and other, and I don't mean to be demeaning towards them, because in R&D you've got to work really hard. You had to work really hard to get there. Like, you had to get a frickin' PhD in engineering to be there. And it's a highly competitive environment. Only the best engineers get there, you know? You have to be a better engineer than I ever was to work in R&D, okay? And this is like a cultural thing. They just need to integrate this attitude into the way they roll. And that would make the cars absolutely brilliant, because you do want advanced technology helping you. I want to be driving a car with stability control, because if I have a tyre blowout, like a rapid deflation of one of the tyres, stability control can do something I can't. It doesn't matter how shit hot you are as a driver. You can't brake individual wheels to keep the chassis in line with the steering. You just can't do that. You can get advanced driver training. You can know to look where you want the car to go and steer in that direction. You can practice that ad nauseum on a skid pan, and you can have instructors play all kinds of dirty tricks on you, and you can get better than that. But you can't frickin' brake individual wheels. Like, stability control goes, oh yeah, I'll just brake the front left here. That'll help. And you can't do that. So advanced technology is awesome, and you want it. You want as much of it that's well integrated as possible. And we're only on the cusp of this ADAS revolution. So car makers really do need to rethink exactly how they're doing this, and they need to do it urgently. And I vote strenuously Mitsubishi first, because they're 95% of the way there. They just need to get the final 5% in place, and then I'll be their biggest freaking advocate.